By the end of World War II, the United States Navy had become the most powerful naval force in the world. It played a decisive role in defeating both Japan in the Pacific and supporting Allied forces in Europe. The scale, technology, and tactics of the US Navy were unmatched, and its dominance shaped global naval warfare for decades to come. We're pumped to give you a fun look at the World War II aircraft carriers that were part of the US Navy, sorted by the years they were deployed. Number 1. The Langley. The USS Langley CV-1 holds a special place in history as the first aircraft carrier of the United States Navy. Converted in 1920 from the cargo ship USS Jupiter, it was also the Navy's first turbo-electric-powered vessel. Commissioned on March 20, 1922, Langley was unique as the only ship rebuilt into a carrier. With an impressive length of over 165 meters and full displacement of 14,000 tons, Langley truly marked a new era in naval aviation. Number 2. Lexington. The Lexington class were a couple of carriers made after the USS Langley. They were built on hulls that were originally meant to be battle cruisers, but after World War I, the Washington Naval Treaty wiped out all of U.S. battleships and battlecruiser construction. Still, the treaty led 2 of those unfinished ships to be turned into carriers. They were actually the first operational aircraft carriers in the United States Navy, and they played a key role in shaping carrier aviation tactics and procedures during a series of annual exercises before World War II. Number 3. The USS Ranger CV-4. USS Ranger CV-4 was an interwar vessel and the only ship of its class. As a treaty ship, Ranger was the first U.S. vessel built from scratch. Ranger was relatively small, similar in size to the USS Langley. Since she was considered too slow for the Pacific Fleet's carrier group fighting against Japan, Ranger spent most of World War II in the Atlantic, where the German fleet, known as the Kriegsmarine, was less of a challenge. Number 4. The Yorktown. The Yorktown class consisted of 3 aircraft carriers that were built just before World War II kicked off. One of the most famous ships from this class, the USS Enterprise, was involved in almost every major battle in the Pacific and racked up an impressive 20 battle stars, making her the most decorated US warship of the entire conflict. She survived multiple bomb and kamikaze attacks but was always repaired and returned to battle. At number 5, the USS Wasp. Commissioned in 1940 and ended up sinking in action 2 years later. It was the only ship of its class, built to make use of the remaining tonnage the US was allowed for aircraft carriers, thanks to treaties at the time. Wasp was like a smaller version of the Yorktown-class aircraft carrier, which made it more vulnerable compared to other US carriers when the fighting started. At first, it was used in the Atlantic Campaign, where the Axis naval forces didn't seem as strong and capable of causing major damage. The Long Island Escort Carrier. The Long Island class was the first type of escort carriers made by the US Navy. Each ship was about 150 meters long. There were 2 ships in this class, the USS Long Island CVE-1, which served into the US Navy, and another one that went to the Royal Navy. The USS Long Island started out as a cargo ship, but was later turned into an escort carrier to see if these kinds of ships would be practical. At number 7, the Sangamon Carrier. The class consisted of 4 escort aircraft carriers. They were initially built from Cimarron-class oil tankers meant for civilian use. They were the biggest conversions of escort carriers made for the US Navy. These ships were super important for providing air support during amphibious operations, escorting convoys, and fighting against submarines. These carriers served in key battles across the Pacific. Number 8. The Avenger Carrier. The Avenger class includes 3 ships that were used by the Royal Navy and 1 that belonged to the United States. These ships started out as merchant vessels, which made them pretty affordable and quick to build. They're about 150 meters long and can carry around 15 to 20 aircraft. On the downside, they don't have much armor and their anti-aircraft defenses are pretty weak. so they can be pretty vulnerable to attacks. Number 9. The Bogue Carrier. The class was an impressive fleet of 45 escort carriers built for the US and the Royal Navy under the Lend-Lease program during World War II. After the war, 10 of these remarkable ships continued to serve in the US Navy, transitioning to helicopter and aircraft transport roles. At 151 meters long, they played a vital role in anti-submarine warfare, convoy protection, and providing air support for amphibious operations. Number 10. The Essex Carriers. The class featured 24 ships, available in short-hull and long-hull styles. 14 of them were in action during World War II. Fortunately, none were taken out by enemy forces, though a few did get beat up pretty badly from kamikaze attacks. Essex class were a key part of the US Navy starting in mid-1943, and even when the 3 Midway class carriers came into play right away after the war, they remained at the core of the US naval power until supercarriers started joining the fleet in 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. Number 11. The Independence class. Ships of this class were a group of light aircraft carriers built for the United States Navy during World War II. These carriers were converted from Cleveland-class light cruiser hulls, allowing for faster construction and deployment compared to full-sized fleet carriers. They played a crucial role in Pacific naval battles, air support, and escort duties. The Casablanca escort carriers represent a remarkable chapter in naval history, with 50 of these aircraft carriers constructed and launched in just under 2 years. While larger, more famous carriers have been preserved as museums, it is fascinating to remember how pivotal these smaller ships were. Sadly, 5 were lost in the heat of World War II, and the others eventually met the scrappers' fate. Number 13. The Commencement Bay Carriers. The Commencement Bay was the last escort aircraft carriers built for the US Navy. These ships were based on the hull of the T-3 tanker, which means they weighed around 23,000 tons and were about 170 meters long. Unlike earlier escort carriers, these were actually designed from the ground up to be aircraft carriers, not just converted from merchant ships or cruisers. At number 14, the Midway class. The Midway class aircraft carriers were special because they were the first US Navy carriers designed after World War II, built to handle larger, heavy aircraft, and remained in service for nearly 50 years, longer than any other class of aircraft carriers. Unlike earlier Essex-class carriers, which had wooden flight decks, Midway-class carriers had armored flight decks, making them more resilient to enemy attacks. Number 15. The Saipan class. The last aircraft carriers the US built during World War II were the Saipan class. They were similar to the Independence class as they were based on cruisers' hulls. The difference is that these were designed specifically as carriers from the ground up, using heavy cruiser hulls instead of light ones. Unfortunately, they were finished after the war ended, but they stayed in service as carriers until the mid-1950s, before being transformed into a command ship and a major communications relay ship. With this, we've come to the end of today's video. But stay tuned as we bring you more interesting videos from the world of military. We'll see you guys again. Bye-bye.